The gunshot from the saloon echoed across Main Street as Naomi Adams sprinted through the darkness, her threadbare shawl clutched tightly around her shoulders. Montana Territory, 1879, was unforgiving to women alone, especially those fleeing from men like Victor Holloway. The autumn night air bit at her cheeks as she darted between buildings, the distant howl of wolves mingling with shouts from the saloon growing fainter behind her. Her breath came in desperate gasps, lungs burning as she pushed herself toward the outskirts of Silver Creek, where moonlight illuminated a small cabin nestled against the foothills. "Just need to disappear," she whispered to herself, stumbling over the uneven ground. Her ankle twisted painfully, but she forced herself forward, glancing over her shoulder. No lanterns bobbed in the darkness behind her. Not yet. Victor's threat still rang in her ears. "You belong to me now, songbird. Your daddy's debts don't disappear just because he did." 3 months ago, her father had been found face down in the creek after a particularly bad night of gambling. The debt collector had arrived a week later, presenting papers with her father's signature that promised not just his property, but his assets, which Victor had interpreted to include Naomi herself. The cabin loomed larger as she approached. It sat dark and seemingly abandoned on the edge of a vast cattle ranch. She'd noticed it during her walks outside town, always empty, likely belonging to one of the ranch hands who stayed with the herd. It would provide shelter for tonight, at least until she could formulate a better plan. The door creaked as she tested it, finding it unlocked. Naomi slipped inside, closing it softly behind her. The interior was pitch black, smelling of wood smoke and leather. She felt her way along the wall, fingers brushing against what felt like a table. A few more careful steps, and her hands found what she sought, the cool glass of an oil lamp. Naomi fumbled in her pocket for the matches she'd taken from the saloon. Her hands trembled violently as she struck one against the rough surface of the table, the small flame illuminating her dirt-smudged face for a moment before she directed it toward the lamp's wick. "You'll never be afraid in my house again." The deep voice froze her in place. The match burned down to her fingertips, and she dropped it with a gasp as the lamp suddenly flared to life, held in the steady hands of a man standing just a few feet away. He was tall, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out the stern set of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders beneath a worn leather vest. A cowboy, certainly, and likely the owner of the cabin she'd just broken into. "I'm sorry," she gasped, backing toward the door. "I didn't think anyone was here. I'll go." "In this weather, with those wolves out there?" The man set the lamp on the table, its light now revealing more of his features. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of the sky just before a storm. "Sit down, miss. You look like you've been running from something worse than wolves." "I can't stay," Naomi insisted, though her legs trembled with exhaustion. "There are men who might come looking. Victor Holloway and his boys." The cowboy asked, his expression hardening. Naomi's eyes widened. "How did word travels? Even out here?" He gestured to a chair by the small stone fireplace. "I'm Adam Nordstrom. This is my ranch, my land. And Holloway knows better than to trespass here." Naomi hesitated, her hand still on the door latch. "I'm Naomi Adams. I sang at the Silver Dollar. Until tonight." "I know who you are, Miss Adams." Adam moved toward the fireplace, kneeling to arrange kindling. "Your voice carries all the way out here on clear nights. Would have been a shame if Holloway had silenced it." The casual way he spoke of what she'd narrowly escaped sent a chill through her. "How much do you know?" "Enough." Adam struck a match, and the kindling caught quickly. "Your father's debts. Holloway's claim. The way he treats women he believes he owns." He stood, dusting his hands on his denims. "I also know you shot him tonight." Naomi's knees finally gave way, and she sank into the chair. "I didn't mean to." He grabbed me after my last song, said it was time to collect. There was a gun on the bar, and Her voice faltered. I don't even know if I killed him. You didn't. Adam moved to a small cabinet, retrieving a bottle and 2 glasses. Grazed his shoulder. But you made an enemy tonight, and Holloway isn't known for forgiveness. He poured a finger of amber liquid into each glass, offering one to her. Naomi took it with still trembling hands, the whiskey burning a path down her throat as she sipped. Why would you help me? She asked. You don't know me. I know enough, Adam replied, settling into the chair opposite hers. The firelight played across his features, softening the hard lines of his face. And I've been looking for a reason to stand against Holloway for some time now. He's a powerful man in Silver Creek. This isn't Silver Creek. Adam's gaze was steady. This is Nordstrom land. My father built this ranch from nothing, and no debt collector or would-be tyrant is going to step foot on it without my say-so. Naomi studied him, trying to understand the quiet confidence in his voice. Your father died last winter. Pneumonia. A shadow crossed Adam's face. Left me the ranch, the cattle, and a fair amount of trouble with men like Holloway who think they can take what isn't theirs. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows across the simple cabin. It was larger than it had appeared from outside, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area and a doorway that presumably led to sleeping quarters. You can stay the night, Adam said, rising to his feet. Tomorrow, we'll figure out what comes next. I can't impose. You're not imposing if you're invited. He moved toward the back room. Take the bed. I'll sleep out here by the fire. Mr. Nordstrom, Adam, he corrected, pausing at the doorway. And like I said, you don't need to be afraid here. Not of Holloway, not of me, not of anything. After he'd gone, Naomi sat watching the flames dance in the fireplace, the whiskey warming her from within as the fire warmed her from without. For the first time since her father's death, she felt something other than terror. It wasn't safety, not yet, but it was something close to hope. Morning light filtered through the cabin's single window, casting a golden rectangle across the rough-hewn floorboards. Naomi blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous night rushed back, and she sat up quickly, finding herself on a bed with a quilt tucked around her. She was still fully clothed, though her boots had been placed neatly beside the bed. The smell of coffee and bacon drew her from the room. Adam stood at the small cast-iron stove, his back to her as he tended to a skillet. He'd shed his vest, wearing only a collarless shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle from years of ranch work. Morning, he said without turning. Coffee's hot if you want some. Thank you. Naomi smoothed her rumpled skirt, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. I'm sorry for taking your bed. Slept fine by the fire. Adam turned, sliding eggs and bacon onto 2 tin plates. His eyes met hers briefly before returning to his task. You talk in your sleep. Heat rushed to Naomi's cheeks. What did I say? Nothing coherent. Just seemed troubled. He placed the plates on the table. Seat. Eat. We need to talk about what happens next. Naomi took a seat, grateful for the hot meal. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten properly. I need to keep moving. Maybe catch the stage to Helena or Butte. Adam shook his head. Holloway has friends in both places. And you don't have the money for passage, do you? Her silence was answer enough. I have a proposition, Adam said, his tone careful. I need help around here. Cook, housekeeper, someone to tend things when I'm out with the herd. It's honest work, with a roof and meals. And protection, Naomi added, studying him. That too. Adam met her gaze steadily. You can stay in the cabin. I usually bunk with the hands anyway when we're working. Why would you do this for a stranger? Adam's expression darkened. Because I've seen what Holloway does to people who can't fight back. My father borrowed money from him last year, during the drought. When he couldn't pay, Holloway's men stampeded half our herd off the North Ridge. 20 good steers lost, and my father too proud to admit it wasn't an accident. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just consider my offer. He stood, collecting his hat from a peg by the door. I need to check the herd. Think about it while I'm gone. After he left, Naomi explored the cabin more thoroughly. It was simple but solid, with furniture crafted by skilled hands. A bookshelf held volumes of poetry and history, surprising her. On the mantel sat a daguerreotype of a stern-faced man with Adam's eyes, standing beside a smiling woman who must have been his mother. A rifle hung above the fireplace, well-maintained and within easy reach. Through the window, Naomi could see a barn, corrals, and beyond them, the distant shapes of cattle grazing on rolling grassland that stretched toward mountains hazy in the morning light. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way. She was washing the breakfast dishes when the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. Tensing, she moved to the window, relaxing only when she recognized Adam's broad-shouldered figure astride a dappled gray horse. Behind him rode 3 other men, likely the ranch hands he'd mentioned. Adam dismounted first, speaking briefly to the others before they continued toward the bunkhouse. He entered the cabin, bringing with him the scent of horses and open air. "Everything all right?" Naomi asked, noting the furrow between his brows. "Riders from town. Not Holloway's men, just regular folk passing through." He hung his hat on its peg. "But they had news. Holloway's put a bounty on you. $500. Naomi felt the blood drain from her face. "For shooting him? For theft, he claims. Says you stole money from the saloon." Adam's mouth twisted in disgust. "It's his way of making it legal for anyone to bring you in." "I should go," Naomi said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm bringing trouble to your door. You're not going anywhere." Adam's tone was final. "Holloway's been looking for an excuse to come after me anyway. This just forces my hand sooner than I expected. What are you going to do?" Adam crossed to the fireplace, taking down the rifle and checking its loading mechanism. "First, I'm going to make sure you're safe. Then, I'm going to have a conversation with some people in town who aren't fond of Holloway either." "There are such people? More than you'd think." Adam's expression softened slightly. "Have you decided about my offer?" Naomi hesitated, weighing her limited options. "If I stay, I want to earn my keep properly. I can cook, clean, sew. And I want to learn to shoot." Adam's eyebrows rose. "Shoot. I never want to be helpless again." Her voice was steady now, the fear giving way to determination. "If I'm going to live out here, I need to be able to defend myself." A slow smile spread across Adam's face, transforming his features. "Fair enough, Miss Adams. We'll start tomorrow." Over the next days, Naomi settled into a routine at the Nordstrom ranch. She rose early, preparing breakfast for Adam and his 3 ranch hands: Jeremiah, an older man with a grizzled beard who served as foreman; Thomas, a former slave from Georgia who rarely spoke but whose gentle way with horses was remarkable; and Luis, a Mexican vaquero whose roping skills were legendary in the territory. The men were initially wary of her presence, but her cooking quickly won them over. Jeremiah, especially, seemed grateful for meals that weren't burned or tasteless. "Lord Almighty, Miss Adams," he declared after her first supper of beef stew and fresh biscuits, "if you keep feeding us like this, we might just have to kidnap you permanent like if you ever decide to leave." "No one's kidnapping anyone," Adam said firmly, though his eyes crinkled at the corners. True to his word, Adam began teaching Naomi to shoot. They started with a small revolver, his hands guiding hers as she learned to sight down the barrel. "Breathe out slowly as you squeeze the trigger," he instructed, his chest warm against her back as he demonstrated the proper stance. "Don't pull, just squeeze." The first shot went wild, the recoil stronger than she'd expected. But by the end of the afternoon, she was hitting the bottle he'd set up on the fence post more often than not. "You're a natural," Adam said, his approval evident. "Tomorrow we'll try the rifle." As October gave way to November, the air grew sharper, the mornings frosty. Adam and the hands worked from dawn to dusk, preparing the ranch for winter. Naomi found herself watching for his return each evening, anticipating the moment he'd step through the door, bringing the outdoors with him. They fell into an easy companionship during the evenings. Adam would read aloud from one of his books while Naomi mended clothes or kneaded bread for the next day. Sometimes he played the harmonica, the melancholy tunes floating through the cabin. One evening, without thinking, Naomi began to sing along, her clear soprano twining around the notes of his instrument. Adam stopped playing, startled. "Don't stop," he said when she fell silent, embarrassed. "Please." So she sang old folk songs her father had taught her, ballads she'd performed at the saloon, hymns from her childhood. When she finished, the cabin was silent except for the crackling of the fire. "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," Adam said finally, his voice rough with emotion. Naomi looked away, flustered by the intensity in his gaze. "It's just singing. It's more than that." He set the harmonica aside. "It's like you're putting your soul into each note." They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Adam rose, his hand moving instinctively to the gun at his hip, but it was only Jeremiah with news about a broken fence line. After the foreman left, something had shifted in the atmosphere between them. Adam seemed more guarded, keeping a careful distance. Naomi found herself missing the easy camaraderie they'd been building. The next day brought the first snow, fat flakes swirling down from a leaden sky. Naomi watched from the cabin window as Adam and the hands worked to bring the cattle closer to the ranch buildings, where they could be more easily fed and protected from the coming winter. They returned after dark, stomping snow from their boots at the door. Adam's face was red with cold, his expression grim. "Storm's coming in fast," he reported, accepting the cup of coffee she handed him. "Might be snowed in for a few days." "I've stocked plenty of supplies," Naomi assured him. "We'll be fine." Adam's eyes met hers over the rim of his cup. "We need to talk, Naomi, after supper." The seriousness in his tone sent a flutter of anxiety through her. Had she done something wrong? Was he regretting his offer of shelter? Supper was a quiet affair. The hands ate quickly before returning to the bunkhouse, leaving Naomi and Adam alone. She cleared the dishes, hyper-aware of his presence as he stared into the fire. "I received a letter today," he said finally, "from the marshal in Helena." Naomi's hands stilled on the washcloth. "About me?" "About Holloway." Adam turned to face her. "He's pressing his case. Claims your father signed over more than just his property to cover the debt." "That's impossible," Naomi said, though doubt crept into her voice. Her father had been desperate in those final months, drinking heavily and gambling whatever he could. "The marshal believes him." Adam's expression was grim. "There's a territorial judge coming through next week. Holloway intends to present his case then." Naomi sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. "What happens if the judge rules in his favor?" "He won't," Adam said firmly, "because we're going to be married before then." For a moment, Naomi thought she'd misheard. "Married? It's the only way." Adam knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "If you're my wife, Holloway's claim becomes invalid. A husband's rights supersede a creditor's, even with a signed agreement." "You'd marry me to thwart Holloway?" Naomi whispered, unsure whether to feel grateful or hurt. "That's not the only reason." Adam's grip tightened on her hands. "These past weeks, I've come to care for you, Naomi. More than I should, perhaps." "Adam, I'm not asking for more than you can give," he continued quickly. "It could be a marriage in name only, if that's what you want. But it would keep you safe." Naomi studied his face, the earnestness in his storm blue eyes. "And what do you want?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "I want you to never be afraid again. I want to hear you sing every evening." He broke off, looking away. "It doesn't matter what I want. This is about your safety. It matters to me." Naomi reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek, turning his face back toward hers. "Ask me properly, Adam Nordstrom." Something flared in his eyes, hope, perhaps, or determination. He took a deep breath. "Naomi Adams, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not just to foil Holloway, but because I believe we could build something good together." The firelight danced across his features, highlighting the sincerity in his expression. Naomi thought of the past weeks, the safety she'd found here, the quiet companionship they developed, the way her heart quickened whenever he entered a room. "Yes," she said simply. "I will." The snow continued through the night, transforming the landscape into a pristine white expanse. By morning, drifts reached halfway up the cabin windows, and the path to the barn was barely visible. Adam and the hands spent the day digging out, ensuring the animals were fed and watered. Naomi baked bread and prepared stew, her mind whirling with the implications of her acceptance. Marriage. To a man she'd known barely a month. Yet somehow, it felt right in a way nothing had since before her father's downward spiral. As darkness fell, Adam returned to the cabin, snow melting in his hair as he shed his heavy coat. "I sent Thomas to town," he announced, warming his hands by the fire. "If the weather holds, he should make it to Silver Creek by tomorrow afternoon. The preacher can be here the day after." "So soon?" Naomi's heart fluttered. "The judge arrives in a week." Adam's expression was apologetic. "I know this isn't how you imagined your wedding, Naomi." "If there were more time, it's fine," she assured him, though her voice trembled slightly. "I never imagined a grand wedding anyway." Adam crossed to her, his hands gentle as they framed her face. "I promise you this Holloway will never touch you. And I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust." "I know." Naomi leaned into his touch. "I'm not afraid, Adam. Not anymore." His thumb traced her cheekbone, his gaze dropping to her lips. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, but he stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should check on the horses once more before turning in." He retrieved his coat. "Good night, Naomi." After he'd gone, Naomi touched her fingertips to her cheek, still feeling the warmth of his hands. Marriage. A new name. A new life. The thought was dizzying. She looked around the cabin. Already it felt like home in a way her father's house never had. If this was to be her future, she could embrace it willingly, not just as escape from Holloway, but as a path forward of her own choosing. The next day passed in a flurry of preparations. Naomi took stock of her meager possessions, wishing she had something finer to wear for the ceremony. Her best dress was still the blue calico she'd worn to the saloon, now carefully washed and mended. Miss Adams. Jeremiah's wife Martha had arrived that morning to help with preparations, bringing with her a trunk of possibilities. "I thought perhaps you might like to see this." She unwrapped a package containing a dress of cream-colored wool, simple but elegant, with tiny pearl buttons down the front. "It was my daughter's," Martha explained, a shadow crossing her weathered face. "She passed during childbirth 5 years ago. Never got to wear it for her wedding day. It would honor her memory if you would." Naomi blinked back tears, touched by the gesture. "Are you certain?" "She would have liked you," Martha said firmly. "Strong-willed as they come. My Rebecca was. Like you." The dress fit as if it had been made for her, needing only minor adjustments to the hem. Martha worked quickly, her gnarled fingers still deft with a needle. "Mr. Nordstrom's a good man," she said as she worked. "Stubborn as an old mule sometimes, but fair and kind-hearted. His father was harder, demanding. The old man never quite saw the worth in him." Adam doesn't talk much about his father. Not surprising. Martha bit off a thread. Frederick Nordstrom was respected, but not well-liked. Drove his wife to an early grave with his coldness, some say. Adam's different. Got his mother's heart. She looked up at Naomi. He looks at you the way a man should look at a woman he means to cherish. Naomi felt heat rise to her cheeks. It's not exactly a love match, Martha. It's complicated. The older woman smiled knowingly. Most worthy things are, dear. But I've seen the way you watch for him, too. Before Naomi could respond, hoofbeats approached outside. Thomas had returned, and he wasn't alone. Naomi moved to the window, watching as 3 riders dismounted. One was unmistakably the preacher, his black coat and collar identifying him even at a distance. The other was a woman Naomi didn't recognize. Adam entered the cabin a few minutes later, stamping snow from his boots. Thomas made it through. Reverend Patterson has agreed to perform the ceremony tomorrow morning. He glanced at Naomi, his expression softening at the sight of her in the cream dress. You look beautiful. Who's the woman? Naomi asked, smoothing the skirt self-consciously. Sarah Johnson, the schoolteacher. We need a witness, and she volunteered. Adam hesitated. There's something else. Holloway knows you're here. Naomi's breath caught.
How?
Someone in town talked. Thomas overheard at the general store. Adam's jaw tightened. Holloway's gathering men. He'll wait for the judge, try to make it official, but he's making sure everyone knows his claim. Then we proceed as planned, Naomi said, squaring her shoulders. Tomorrow I'll be Naomi Nordstrom, and his claim becomes worthless. Adam's eyes darkened at her words, something possessive flashing in their depths.
Yes.
Tomorrow. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She lay awake in Adam's bed, soon to be their bed, listening to the wind howling around the cabin. Her thoughts were a tumult of anticipation and uncertainty. Marriage had never figured into her plans after watching her mother wither under her father's negligence. Yet here she was, on the eve of becoming a wife. Not just any wife. Adam Nordstrom's wife. She thought of his hands, strong and capable, whether handling horses or helping her aim a rifle. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. How he listened, truly listened, when she spoke. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something with the potential to grow into love, given time and nurturing. Dawn broke clear and cold, sunlight sparkling off the snow-covered landscape. Martha helped Naomi dress, arranging her hair in a simple but elegant style, weaving dried wildflowers into the dark strands. Something borrowed, she said, fastening a small silver brooch to the high collar of the dress. It's not much, but it was my mother's. It's perfect, Naomi assured her, touching the delicate piece. Thank you, Martha, for everything. The ceremony took place in the cabin's main room, before the blazing fireplace. Jeremiah and Thomas had cleared the furniture, creating a small space where Reverend Patterson stood, Bible in hand. Sarah Johnson, the schoolteacher, watched with a sentimental smile, while Luis played softly on Adam's harmonica. And then Adam was there, clean-shaven and wearing his best shirt and vest, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. His eyes never left Naomi as she crossed the room to stand beside him. The Reverend's words washed over her promises of love, honor, and cherishing. When the time came to speak her vows, Naomi's voice was steady, her conviction growing with each word. Adam's hands were warm around hers, his voice deep and sure as he pledged himself to her. The ring? Reverend Patterson prompted. Adam reached into his vest pocket, producing a simple gold band. It was my mother's, he explained quietly to Naomi. I've been carrying it since the day you agreed. As he slipped it onto her finger, his thumb caressed her palm, the gesture intimate in a way that made her breath catch. By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The Reverend smiled benevolently. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Nordstrom. For a heartbeat, Adam hesitated, his eyes questioning. Naomi gave a slight nod, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first, then with growing intensity as her hands found their way to his shoulders. The world narrowed to just the two of them, the taste of him, the solid warmth of his body against hers. Someone, probably Jeremiah, let out a whoop, breaking the spell. Adam drew back, his eyes dark with emotion as he gazed down at her. "Mrs. Nordstrom," he murmured, the name sounding right in a way Naomi hadn't expected. The celebration that followed was simple but joyous. Martha had prepared a feast, and Luis convinced Thomas to retrieve his fiddle from the bunkhouse. Soon the small cabin was filled with music and laughter. Adam stayed close to Naomi throughout, his hand often finding the small of her back or entwining with hers. Each touch sent warmth cascading through her, building an anticipation that both thrilled and terrified her. As evening approached, the guests began to depart. Reverend Patterson and Sarah would stay the night in the bunkhouse before returning to town the next day. Martha hugged Naomi fiercely before leaving with Jeremiah. "Be happy, child," she whispered. "You both deserve it." And then they were alone, husband and wife, standing in the cabin that now officially belonged to both of them. "Are you hungry?" Naomi asked, suddenly shy. "There's plenty of food left."
No.
Adam's voice was low, his eyes intent on her face. "Naomi, I meant what I said. This can be whatever you want it to be. If you need time." She silenced him by stepping closer, her hands coming to rest against his chest.
"I don't need time, Adam.
I need you to kiss me again." Relief and desire flashed across his features before he pulled her into his arms, his mouth finding hers with newfound confidence. This kiss was different, deeper, hungrier, filled with promise. Naomi melted against him, her arms winding around his neck as he lifted her, carrying her toward the bedroom that was now truly theirs. Later, as moonlight spilled through the window, casting silver patterns across the tangled bedsheets, Naomi traced the contours of Adam's face with wondering fingers. "I never expected this," she confessed. "Any of it. Regrets?" Adam caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "None." She nestled closer, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder. "I think perhaps this is where I was always meant to be." Adam's arm tightened around her. "I'll make you happy, Naomi. I swear it." "You already do." She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "Sleep now, husband. Tomorrow begins our real life together." As Adam's breathing deepened in sleep, Naomi remained awake a while longer, marveling at the turns her life had taken. 1 month ago, she'd been trapped and terrified, seeing no way out of her father's legacy of debt. Now she was Adam Nordstrom's wife, safe in his arms, with a future spreading before them as vast and promising as the Montana sky. The next morning brought reality crashing back in the form of Luis, pounding on their door at dawn. "Riders coming," he reported when Adam answered, his expression grim. 6 men, from the direction of town. Adam's face hardened. "Holloway."
Adam.
Naomi appeared in the bedroom doorway, clutching a shawl around her nightdress, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Stay inside," he instructed, already reaching for his gun belt. "Luis, get Thomas and Jeremiah. Make sure the preacher and Miss Johnson stay in the bunkhouse." Naomi disappeared into the bedroom, emerging moments later dressed in her everyday skirt and blouse. "I'm coming with you." "Naomi, I'm your wife now," she said firmly, retrieving the revolver he'd been teaching her to use. "This concerns both of us." Pride flashed in Adam's eyes before he nodded. "Stay behind me." They stepped onto the porch as the riders approached. Victor Holloway led them, his right arm in a sling, evidence of Naomi's shot. Behind him rode 5 men, including the burly bartender from the Silver Dollar and several others Naomi recognized as Holloway's regular enforcers. "Morning, Nordstrom," Holloway called, reining in his horse. His gaze shifted to Naomi, malice glittering in his small eyes. "I see you've been harboring my property." "Mrs. Nordstrom belongs to no one but herself," Adam replied evenly, though Naomi could feel the tension radiating from him. And as her husband, I'd advise you to choose your next words carefully. Holloway's expression soured. Wife. That's convenient. When did this supposed marriage take place? Yesterday morning. Reverend Patterson officiated. Adam's hand rested on his holstered gun. It's legal and binding, Holloway. Whatever claim you thought you had is void. That remains to be seen. Holloway sneered. A convenient marriage won't erase the debt her father incurred. I have papers that a territorial judge will find highly suspicious, came a new voice. Sarah Johnson emerged from the bunkhouse, the Reverend beside her. She approached with confident strides, her chin high. Especially given your reputation, Mr. Holloway. This doesn't concern you, schoolmarm, Holloway snapped. On the contrary, Sarah produced a folded document from her pocket. As town clerk, everything concerning Silver Creek's legal matters falls under my purview, including the suspicious timing of William Adams' loan documents, which appear to have been altered after his death. Murmurs ran through Holloway's men. The bartender shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. That's a serious accusation, Holloway growled. One I'm prepared to present to Judge Wallace when he arrives. Sarah's smile was cold. Along with testimonies from several other parties who found their debts mysteriously increased after settling with you. Holloway's face mottled with rage. You think your word against mine will matter? I own half this territory. Perhaps. It was Reverend Patterson who spoke now, his voice carrying the weight of moral authority. But Mrs. Nordstrom is legally wed, and no judge in the territory would uphold a claim on a married woman, even if your papers were legitimate, which Miss Johnson has reason to doubt. Holloway's eyes darted between them, calculating his options. His men looked increasingly uncomfortable, unwilling to engage in what was becoming a legal rather than physical confrontation. This isn't over, Nordstrom, he finally spat. You've made an enemy today. I made an enemy the day I refused to sell my water rights, Adam replied calmly. This changes nothing except that you now know where you stand. Off my property, Holloway. And don't come back. For a tense moment, it seemed Holloway might order his men to attack anyway. But after a long, venomous stare, he yanked his horse's reins, turning the animal sharply. Let's go, boys. We'll let the judge sort this out. As they rode away, Naomi realized she'd been holding her breath. She exhaled shakily, her fingers loosening on the revolver. Thank you, she said to Sarah and the Reverend. Both of you. Sarah smiled. I've been gathering evidence against Holloway for months. Your case might be what finally brings him down. Is it true? About the altered documents? Adam asked. Very likely. Several widows and orphans have found themselves in similar situations after dealing with him. Sarah's expression was determined. The judge will hear all of it. After the schoolteacher and Reverend departed for town, Naomi and Adam stood on the porch, watching the snow sparkle in the morning sunlight. Do you think it's really over? Naomi asked, leaning against his solid presence. Not entirely. Men like Holloway don't give up easily. Adam's arm encircled her waist. But we've won the first battle, and we'll face whatever comes next together. Naomi turned in his embrace, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. Together, she agreed. Winter settled over the Montana territory, transforming the landscape into a pristine wilderness of white. The Nordstrom ranch operated at a slower pace, with Adam and his hands focusing on maintaining the herd through the harsh months. Naomi found herself settling into ranch life with surprising ease. She learned to make soap from Martha, improved her shooting under Adam's patient tutelage, and even began riding, though she still preferred the gentlest of the ranch horses. Evenings were her favorite time. After supper, when the hands had retired to the bunkhouse, she and Adam would sit before the fire, reading or talking or simply existing in companionable silence. Sometimes he would play his harmonica, and she would sing, their music filling the small cabin with warmth that rivaled the hearth. And at night, in the privacy of their bedroom, she discovered the joys of being truly loved by a man who cherished her body and soul. Adam was a tender, attentive lover, always attuned to her pleasure, his reverence for her never diminishing. "I never thought I could feel this way," she confessed one night, curled against him beneath the heavy quilts as a blizzard howled outside. "So complete." Adam's hand traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I knew the moment you stood in this cabin with that revolver, refusing to be afraid anymore, that you were extraordinary." "I was terrified," Naomi admitted with a soft laugh. "But you stood your ground anyway." Adam pressed a kiss to her forehead. "That's courage, Naomi. It's not the absence of fear, but facing it anyway." December brought the news they'd been waiting for. Judge Wallace had heard the evidence against Victor Holloway and found significant irregularities in his business practices. While not enough to imprison him, the judgments against him were substantial, requiring payment to several parties he defrauded, including the Adams estate. "He'll likely have to sell his interests in the saloon to cover it all," Adam reported after returning from town. "His influence in Silver Creek is waning fast."
Good.
Naomi set a cup of coffee before him. "Perhaps others will be spared what I nearly wasn't." As Christmas approached, Naomi threw herself into preparations, determined to make their first holiday together memorable. She baked cookies with Martha, strung popcorn garlands with Sarah, who had become a frequent visitor and friend, and even convinced Adam to bring home a small pine tree, which they decorated with paper stars and candles. On Christmas Eve, after a feast that brought all the ranch hands to the main cabin, Adam presented Naomi with a gift, a beautiful rosewood music box that played a delicate melody when opened. "It reminded me of you," he said as she traced its carved lid with wondering fingers. "Something beautiful that creates beauty." Naomi blinked back tears. "I have something for you too, though it's not something I could wrap." Adam raised an eyebrow questioningly. "In June," Naomi said softly, taking his hand and placing it gently against her still flat stomach, "we'll be 3 instead of 2. The wonder that bloomed across Adam's face was everything she'd hoped for. He gathered her into his arms, his embrace gentle, as if she might break. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby. Are you pleased?" Naomi asked, suddenly uncertain. Adam drew back, cupping her face in his hands. "Please doesn't begin to describe it. Naomi, you've given me everything I never knew I wanted: a true partner, a home filled with music and laughter, and now a family." His voice roughened with emotion. "I love you more than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," Naomi replied, the words that had been growing in her heart for months finally finding voice. "So much." Spring came to Montana in fits and starts: warm days followed by late snowfalls, then sudden thaws that turned the ranch into a sea of mud. As the land reawakened, so too did Naomi's body change, her belly swelling with the promise of new life. Adam became impossibly protective, insisting she rest frequently and delegating more chores to the hands. Naomi indulged him to a point, but refused to be treated as an invalid. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him when he objected to her tending the vegetable garden. "Many of them while working fields or crossing prairies in wagons." "None of them were my wife," Adam countered, though he compromised by helping her plant the carrots and beans she insisted upon growing. In late April, a letter arrived that disrupted their peaceful existence. Adam read it with a darkening expression before handing it to Naomi. "It's from my uncle in San Francisco," he explained. "My father's brother." The letter was brief, but significant. Adam's uncle Lawrence was dying and wished to see his only nephew before he passed. There was also the matter of an inheritance, substantial holdings that would secure the ranch's future for generations. "You have to go," Naomi said, though the thought of Adam traveling so far while she was expecting filled her with apprehension. "I won't leave you," Adam insisted. Not now. It's at least a 2-week journey each way, Naomi reasoned. If you leave now, you can be back well before the baby arrives. They argued for days, neither willing to yield. Finally, Martha intervened. I'll stay with her, she promised Adam. Move right into the cabin. Jeremiah can manage the hands, and Dr. Wilson is just in town if needed. Still, Adam hesitated, torn between duty to his family's legacy and his unwillingness to leave Naomi's side. The inheritance could secure our child's future, Naomi reminded him gently. And your uncle deserves to see you one last time. In the end, necessity won out. Adam agreed to make the journey, but insisted on additional precautions, hiring an extra hand specifically to run for the doctor if needed, and extracting promises from everyone to send word immediately if anything changed with Naomi's condition. The morning of his departure was difficult for both of them. Adam held her for a long time, his hand resting on the swell of her belly, where their child grew. For weeks, he promised. No more. If Uncle Lawrence's affairs aren't settled by then, they'll have to continue without me. Naomi forced a smile. We'll be waiting right here. After he rode away, the ranch seemed emptier, quieter, despite Martha's steady presence and the regular visits from Sarah. Naomi threw herself into preparations for the baby, sewing tiny garments, preparing the cradle Adam had crafted, and writing daily letters to her husband that she saved to give him upon his return. The days passed slowly. Spring advanced, bringing wildflowers to the meadows and new calves to the herd. Naomi's body continued its changes, the baby now moving vigorously, especially in the evenings when she would sing. A music lover already, Martha observed with a smile. Just like its parents. 3 weeks into Adam's absence, Naomi awoke one night to a sharp pain that took her breath away. She lay still, waiting, and another came several minutes later. Martha, she called, her voice steady despite the fear fluttering in her chest. I think it's time. The older woman appeared in the doorway, taking in the situation with experienced eyes. Too early, she muttered, but moved with efficient calm, gathering clean linens and heating water. Thomas, she called to the hand who slept on the porch during Adam's absence. Ride for Dr. Wilson.
Now.
The labor progressed quickly, too quickly, Naomi thought, remembering stories of first babies taking their time. Each contraction seemed to come harder and faster than the last, the pain building until she could barely catch her breath between them. Something's wrong, she gasped as Martha wiped her forehead with a cool cloth. It's too soon. Martha's expression was carefully neutral, but Naomi could see the concern in her eyes. Babies come when they're ready, not when we are. You're strong, Naomi. And so is this child. Another pain tore through her, and Naomi cried out, wishing desperately for Adam's steady presence, his reassuring voice. Hours blurred together in a haze of pain and exertion. The doctor arrived sometime before dawn, his face grave as he examined her. The baby's positioned wrong, he explained to Martha, though Naomi heard every word. We need to turn it. What followed was the most excruciating experience of Naomi's life. The doctor's manipulations sent fresh waves of agony through her already exhausted body. She bit down on a folded cloth to keep from screaming, tears streaming down her face. There, the doctor said finally. Now push, Mrs. Nordstrom. Push with everything you have. Gathering her remaining strength, Naomi bore down, a primal sound tearing from her throat. Distantly, she heard hoofbeats approaching at a gallop, but her world had narrowed to this moment, this final effort. And then, miraculously, relief followed immediately by the thin, outraged cry of a newborn. A boy, Dr. Wilson announced, placing the squalling infant on Naomi's chest. Small, but strong. Naomi gazed down at her son in wonder, the tiny face scrunched in protest, dark hair plastered his head, perfect miniature fingers curling and uncurling against her skin. William, she whispered, the name she and Adam had chosen if the baby was a boy, after her father.
Adam Nordstrom.
The cabin door burst open, and Adam stood there, travel-worn and wild-eyed, having ridden day and night after receiving Thomas's message. His gaze locked on Naomi and the child in her arms, and all color drained from his face.
Adam, Naomi similet weekly, her ehauschen momentarily forgotten.
Come meet your son. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, dropping to his knees beside the bed. His hands trembled as he reached out to touch the baby's dark head. He's perfect. Adam's voice broke on the words.
And you?
God, Naomi, I thought I might lose you both. Never, she promised, leaning into his touch as he caressed her cheek. We were waiting for you to complete our family. In the days that followed, Adam rarely left Naomi and William's side. He held his son with reverent care, marveling at each tiny feature, and supported Naomi through the challenges of early motherhood with unwavering devotion. My uncle's inheritance will allow us to expand the ranch, he told her as they sat on the porch one evening, William sleeping peacefully in Naomi's arms. Build a proper house, perhaps. Something worthy of raising our family in. This cabin has been good to us, Naomi said, looking back at the simple structure that had sheltered her when she most needed protection. Our first home, and always special for that reason. Adam's arm tightened around her shoulders. But I want to give you both more. Over the following year, the Nordstrom ranch flourished. The inheritance allowed Adam to purchase additional land, increase his herd, and begin construction on a new house, a comfortable 2-story home with wide windows and a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Naomi insisted on certain features: a large kitchen where she could teach William to bake when he was older, bookshelves built into the walls of the sitting room, and most importantly, a music room with space for the piano Adam had surprised her with on their first anniversary. William grew from a fragile newborn into a sturdy, curious toddler with his father's blue eyes and his mother's musical inclinations. He babbled happily along when Naomi sang, and watched with fascination whenever Adam played the harmonica. As they prepared to move into their new house in the summer of 1881, Naomi found herself drawn back to the cabin one last time. She stood in the main room, remembering the night she'd arrived, terrified, desperate, her hands shaking as she'd lit the lamp. Thinking about the past. Adam's voice came from the doorway, William perched on his hip. Remembering how it all began, Naomi corrected, turning to smile at her husband and son. How afraid I was that night. Adam crossed to her, his free arms slipping around her waist. And now? Naomi leaned into his embrace, her hand coming up to brush William's soft cheek. Now I know what you promised was true. I've never been afraid in your house again. Our house, Adam corrected gently. Then and now. As they stepped out of the cabin together, the Montana sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Naomi reflected on the journey that had brought them here from a desperate escape to a love that had grown stronger with each passing day. What are you thinking? Adam asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Naomi smiled up at him, her heart full. That sometimes the darkest nights lead us to the brightest dawns, and that I'm grateful for every step of the path that brought me to you. Adam's kiss was tender, a promise renewed. As am I, my love. As am I. William squirmed between them, demanding attention with a string of babbled syllables that made them both laugh. Together, they walked toward their new home, silhouetted against the sunset, a family forged in adversity but thriving in love, their future stretching before them as vast and promising as the Montana sky above. Years passed, seasons changing in their eternal cycle across the Montana landscape. The Nordstrom Ranch grew into one of the most prosperous in the territory, its boundaries expanding as Adam applied modern techniques and sound management. By 1885, William had been joined by 2 sisters, Elizabeth, a solemn child with her father's thoughtful nature, and Catherine, whose fiery spirit matched her copper-colored hair. The house rang with children's laughter, music from Naomi's piano, and the comfortable sounds of a happy family. Victor Holloway had left Silver Creek not long after the judge's ruling. His influence diminished, and his businesses sold to cover his debts. The town flourished without his predatory presence, with Sarah Johnson eventually becoming its first female mayor. On their 5th anniversary, Adam took Naomi back to the cabin where their story had begun. They preserved it as a guest house, though it was rarely used except when ranch hands needed extra space during busy seasons. "Do you remember that first night?" Adam asked as they stood in the doorway, the setting sun casting long shadows across the floor. "Every detail," Naomi replied, leaning against his shoulder. "I was terrified, exhausted. And then there you were, lighting the lamp, promising me safety." "I knew then," Adam confessed, turning to face her. "Something about you called to me from that first moment. It wasn't just wanting to protect you.
It was
recognition. As if my soul knew yours. Even before I did?" Naomi teased gently. "Even then." Adam's smile was tender as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Though I didn't dare hope you might someday feel the same. And now look at us." Naomi gestured to the life they'd built, the ranch visible through the window, the children waiting at the main house under Martha's watchful eye. 3 children, a thriving ranch, music filling our days. And nights, Adam added with a meaningful glance that still, after 5 years, could make her blush. As they walked back to their home hand in hand, Naomi reflected on the journey from frightened singer to confident ranch wife and mother. The path hadn't always been smooth. There had been difficult births, harsh winters, cattle sickness, and all the ordinary challenges of building a life together. But through it all, Adam had kept his promise. In his house, their house, she had found not just safety, but joy, purpose, and a love that continued to deepen with each passing day. That night, after the children were asleep, they sat together on the porch swing, watching stars appear in the vast Montana sky. "What do you think the next 5 years will bring?" Naomi asked, her head resting against Adam's shoulder. "More of this, I hope." His arm tightened around her. "More music, more children if we're blessed, watching William and the girls grow. Building something lasting." "Sounds perfect," Naomi murmured.
And it was.
Not perfect in the sense of being without challenges or sorrows. Life on the frontier ensured those would always come, but perfect in its completeness, in the circle of love they had created together. From terrified stranger to beloved wife, from a desperate night to a lifetime of mornings, Naomi's journey had brought her exactly where she was meant to be, safe in the arms of the man who had first lit her lamp and her heart, promising her a future without fear. A future they continued to build, together, beneath the vast Montana sky.